Testing, testing, microphones, testing. Oh boy. Let's see. Don't think we have anybody going tonight, so I'm just gonna start doing some work and wait for people to show up. Oh, somebody's here. Sounds are sounding. Brendan Eddy, 3526, and my vocals coming in all right. Kind of just going along here. No, I'm not working on the auction house anymore right now. I'm working on Guild Bank. Guild Bank item parameter. Guild Bank items views holder. It's been a while since I worked with this, so. This is something completely different here. All right, we got some things in there. Let's see. Oh, we got people rolling in. Hello, everyone. How are you this evening? Anybody alive? Anybody here? Is my voice coming through? Check my OBS. It seems like you guys can hear me, but tell me if you can. Happy Easter to you as well, Marcus. I will say, working on things once a week is very strange. I'm so used to just literally straight up just plowing through stuff, so it's definitely a little odd feeling. Alright, let's see here. So Guild Bank item, that is, I've already got this. This is okay. A lot of behavior. Context menus, so Guild Bank item, this is going to be interesting. Oh boy, it's been a while since I worked on all this, so should be interesting. But hey, gives you some view into the auction house list here. How all this fun stuff works. Auction house for okay. Let's see, what do we need? Update list, select item, window closed. Yeah, we're gonna need all this other fun stuff. Filters and all that kind of stuff. Just some Brandon says, is thinking of ways to exploit the guild bank. Have you taken into consideration a single player making a guild with only their alts and use it as a large shared storage? Yeah. So yeah, I haven't really considered things to do around that yet, but a guild bank would probably come with a hefty cost to open a guild bank, and it would likely require not only that, but the guild bank itself is going to have limitations. It's not going to be unlimited, so it'll have, like, 20 slots, 50 slots, whatever we set those values at. And my initial idea was to essentially have players be able to donate money towards the expansion of the guild bank. So, like, kind of like have a GoFundMe thing at the bottom that was like, to purchase the next guild expansion is 50 gold, and that'll buy you maybe 20 slots. And as a player or a member of the guild, you can donate some money, and the money doesn't go to anyone directly, but it does go to the progress of the guild bank towards the next unlock. Right? So, like, you can know, okay, I'm going to donate this money to the guild bank, and I know that money is not going to just go to the guild leader or an officer. It's going to go directly to helping make the guild bank larger so we can store more items, right? So that's kind of what's been rolling around in my head, is something interesting and different than what we've done, say, with the auction house. So but I haven't really thought of what those limitations are, what those look like, what's the initial cost to open a bank, does your guild have to have X number of members. There's all kinds of different criteria we can put in front of that, but that's absolutely something we should consider. Because you're right, storage is at a premium, and players will find ways to take advantage of the systems that you put in front of them. So for those of you who haven't been here for the last two streams, what we are trying to do at this point is kind of mimic the auction house and create a guild bank. So last time I successfully created a new interactive, which I believe is the interactive guild bank. Yeah, so this is an interactive item that exists within the world, and the player interacts with it, and it opens the proper UI element that we created. So that's kind of the first step there. And now what we want to do is we want to basically work on the UI and complete a transaction where the player can place an item into the guild bank, and then that item shows up in a list. So that dives us into a little bit of some UI programming, right? So we use this plugin called OSA, which is a list pooling system. So basically it only shows things in your current view of the list, because otherwise, you can imagine if you had a list of items and there were 1,000 items in that list, you don't want to spawn 1,000 items and then scroll through them. It's terrible for performance. So what you do is you only display what the list can show, and then you have a buffer zone above and below the list of those items also spawn. And then as you move through the list via scrolling, it recycles the ones that are not visible, right? So it'll pull those out of the pool, it'll assign the new data to it, and update the information as it becomes visible. It's just a performance improvement there. So, but I need to figure out what I'm doing. So I know we're going to take some fields and some stuff from the auction house here. I know we're going to have a filter, right? So this text input filter is a custom class we have. Let's see, we're gonna have some labels at the bottom here. So let's go ahead and we're gonna have these sort icons, sort direction button, clear category, sort drop down category. Like, most of these we're probably going to use. So let's just copy all of them for now, or we'll get rid of the ones we don't want later. So for example, we're probably not going to have an auctions and a buy it now, so we can actually get rid of these immediately because my auctions is winning. We don't need those. Can use is fine. Level slider, category drop down, sort type, clear category. Okay, I think we're good there. Audio clips, this is for when information comes in and comes out. We don't really need to concern ourselves with that at the moment. Let's see, what do we do when we start this UI up? So okay, so we do some, when this list turns on, looks like we call, Okay, this is where we're going to subscribe to all their events. I don't really care about this right now. I'll just put some to-do items here. No, I think it's a protected override void wake. Let's do that. Base.wake. Put this to do in here and say Yep. That's the way we go, Marcus. So, and by the way, feel free to throw questions at me. Like, my train of thought is all over the place at the moment. So, time next label refresh, holding shift on destroy. So we're gonna do the same thing here with on destroy. Unsubscribe changes, populate sorters. Interesting. Okay. Window closed. Let's just, this is all like minor things at this point of the release. So what we need to do, it looks like this is a auction house update. So we probably want to trace this back and say, okay, what's actually causing this here? Okay, so the auction house UI has a reference to this auction list. So if we look at the Guild Bank UI, we're going to have a reference as well. So we're going to take a few references from here. Universal Container UI, this is essentially where the player is going to deposit the item. So we'll call this deposit container. We're not going to use an auction house for sale list. We're going to do a Guild Bank contents list. Yeah, it's fine. Universal Container UI. Don't know where we use this, but this is used on the player collection controller when we're looking at auctions. Okay, so we need this for initializing the player. So we're going to say public universal container UI, deposit container. Just expose a reference to that so we can actually do stuff there. Okay, great. So we've got our mono here, which is show and hide. We're going to be doing some stuff. That's great. We've got some let's see. Yeah, so we're going to do some overrides here. So we're going to tell the, I think we already do that. Yeah, we already do that up here. So we'll actually take these and put them in this region so we know where they're at for later. Great. We don't need this using auction house since we're not doing that anymore. Okay. A lot of stuff going on here. Refresh available currency when the window is shown. When it's hidden, we update the auction list to empty. Okay, so here's this initialization here. Currency change, subscriptions. We don't care about that yet. Update auction list. Okay, so there's two things here. So update auction list. Looks like this comes in and actually tells the client what to display. So this looks like an initial entry point here from the yep, so we nullify it there, and then yep, so this is in the player RPC handler, and we get a server auction house auction list. So this is a server to client RPC. So this is the server telling the client you need to do something. It's sending along some data, and then the client is then taking that data and pumping it into the auction list. Okay, so what we can do here is we can say public void update contents list, right? And what kind of stuff are we going to put inside of it? We did say we had a Guild Bank item. Yes, and this already has our network serializable that we worked on last week. So we're going to pass in essentially a list of Guild Bank item. There's a parameter here. Import those missing. Where was that at? That was at... Yes, here we go. So just like the auctions, we're going to say pass in these contents from an external source. We can also, we know we're going to probably have updates, right? So the auction house, anytime someone, hello, Code with Sora, hello. Thanks for joining us. Process auction house updates. So this is, if we trace this one back, so this is actually a packet that gets sent with an auction house opcode. And if we look through those, we're going to see this is in the server auction house manager in this nicely named method called broadcast to listeners. So anytime we have an auction house update, someone makes a bid, someone purchases, someone alters the state of an auction that's currently in progress, the server is going to basically put together some data that tells the client what changed and then broadcast that with a specific opcode of auction house. And then the client network manager can say, oh, okay, this is an auction house packet. We're going to make sure we have the auction house available, and then we're going to pump that to the auction house. So we're going to mimic the same thing here because we know we're going to be dealing with the same type of information. So process guild bank update. Let's just call it that now. We're going to pass in a bit buffer, which will contain data. And then if guild bank contents list, then we're going to have to, in the guild bank content list, we're going to need a processor here. That's internal void process guild bank update bit buffer. Do something. Okay. Great. So let's go back here. Guild bank contents list dot process guild bank update. Pass the buffer in. So just kind of passing that along. Excellent. So we've taken care of that. We're just setting down the kind of framework here to make that run. The auction house list is really the big thing because when we open the window, that's going to give us everything we need. So again, we're going to check for the guild bank content list, and then inside of that, we need an update list method that's similar to this. So if we go to guild bank contents list, we're going to have an internal void update list. And we're going to pass in a list of guild bank items. All right, need to make sure we import collections here. Okay, so again, we're just passing things. So we have this list. This list is kind of a holder that handles the showing and the pooling of the list items. So we're kind of, this UI is the front that does all the kind of top level control. So from the external, we're going to communicate with the UI. The UI is then going to contact the list and tell it to refresh the contents of the list, and then that will trigger kind of a visual refresh. Oh boy, why would you do such a thing, Marcus? I don't need them coming here and roasting me. But I do appreciate it. But I don't want anybody to listen to my voice or have to suffer through this nightmare. Update lists, pass those contents in. So you'll notice on the auction house list here, one of the things I do is, where's it at? The auction house for sale list item, guild bank item, guild bank stuff goes over here. Auction house UI, yes. So you'll notice I have this static list pool, return to pool. So what that means is when I get this data here, so when the server RPC comes down with the list of data, it essentially pulls this data into a from a list pool. So this is the data that gets sent with the full list of auctions here, and when the data is packed, it essentially borrows a list to do that and then returns the list when it's done. And the reason it does that is because you don't want to constantly be creating lists and destroying lists, because then there's, C# has garbage collection overhead and things like that. Yeah, thanks, Marcus. You take it easy. Enjoy your weekend, sir. So we're going to do the same thing here. And again, we'll double check all this at some point, but it's going to be good to just kind of mimic this, because we're going to be doing the same exact thing. And you know, if you're doing the same thing like this, you would consider breaking this out into a shared, you know, code base, so you don't have to write the same you know, like foundational code all over again. And that's something I might investigate in the future, but right now I'm just going to do it all by hand, because I want to make sure that it's doing exactly what I want it to do, and then I'll consider whether it's worth the time and effort to actually consolidate the things. I don't necessarily foresee us doing this again in the future, and the auction house and the guild bank are going to be different enough that it's unlikely that we would benefit from generalizing this more. It's possible, but yeah, my brain's not in the right space to take that on right now. I'm always of the mindset of like, get it working first. Once it's working, then you can always make it better, right? So, okay. So this is updating the list, the UI, all of those things. Now, remember how I said this was a kind of a front to things? Yeah, we should do this on, make sure we call this as well. I'll worry about that later. Okay, so we have RPC handler here, and this is the auction house RPC handler. So we're probably gonna need another one of these for the guild bank. What's going on, Nick? How are you doing? Game, player RPC handler. Cool, so you'll get to see a new RPC being written here. I think we need to go to networking. Game, player RPC generated auction house. So let's make a new one. This is a player RPC handler, and we're going to call this guild bank. Just to keep things separate, this is actually what's called a partial class. So if you come up here and look, it's a partial class, and that just means all of these scripts are actually the same script. They're just split out into different physical files. I mean, not physical files, digital files, obviously. Just for organizational sake and your brain not exploding. Because if you look at like the collections, for example, there's a lot of RPCs defined in here. And these RPCs all do a number of different things: augments, repairs, ember essence, hunting log, tasks, layer visibility toggles, vanity pets. Like, these all have this huge list of RPCs. You know, here's a whole set of requests, and if we go down, we can see this file alone is, you know, almost 1400 lines long, right? That's also part of this auction house list. This auction house list is another 200 lines long, right? Execution pipeline, this is 300 lines long, right? So having all these into one list is just, it's painful. So it's nice that C# lets you just pull this out and make it a separate list. Collections, yeah, that's the big one. What did I have open? I had play RPC auction house. Here we go. So this is a partial class. So we just put that partial modifier there, and it's, we get rid of the guild bank, and now it's part of player RPC handler. So I'll do a region here. Awesome. So, auction list internal. Yep, great. Okay, so the auction house is pretty straightforward. I've got a server and a client RPC section. The server section is literally, you know, server to client. What do I have in the client? Okay, so auction house, new auction, auction house place bid, auction house buy it now, auction house cancel auction. So that's all the client does. We don't need to concern ourselves with that right now. The server is doing auction list, send auction response, and that's it. Okay, great. So we're gonna say, let's write a new RPC, public void server. I'm gonna prefix this with server. This is just kind of a way to help, you know, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually decorate these methods with this RPC here that tells the code what kind of RPC we're actually working with. And the reason that's important is because when we look at where server to client is used here, there's actually validation that occurs in the RPC handler. So for example, validate incoming RPC permissions, and this all happens on the server, and it says, if the, it basically checks and says, hey, is this RPC coming from who I think it should be coming from? If it is, then we go ahead and execute that RPC. If we don't, then we just throw the data away because somebody's messing with us. So I'm going to prefix this method with server underscore just so when we're calling it externally from outside of this file, we can't see this here. This isn't like easily viewable. So by just putting server underscore, that tells us, the developers, that, hey, when we're calling it, anything that starts with like a server prefix, I didn't do it here because apparently I'm a terrible coder. These aren't RPCs, these are just kind of helper methods, but this specific one, I did not prefix it with server. But I'm gonna do it from here. So guild bank, that's the feature we're working on, and then list contents, right? And then what are we gonna send along? We're gonna send, if we look at this data here, so auction house data, I think we have something similar for the guild bank. Apologies if I'm jumping around too much. Just following the train of thought, right? Guild bank contents list, guild bank item, guild bank UI. Okay, so we just need kind of like a generic class that's going to hold stuff. So we can do the same thing. Guild bank data. Just a new script here that basically just has some stuff, right? So we're going to put some network code in here. These are all structures with the iNetwork serializable, so these are all information that we pass around, right? So, okay, so what we want is we want to mimic this auction list, right? Because what we're looking at is when the client right-clicks on the guild bank, we're going to send a request to the server to say, I want to interact with the guild bank, and then the server is going to basically say, okay, what guild are you in? Let me grab the collection of items that belong to your guild, and then I'm going to take that, put it in a data structure, and send it to you so you can display it locally on your client. Because that's essentially what happens with the auction house list. When the client requests this, the server just basically builds a list of these auctions and sends it down to the player so you can show it in the list. So we're going to go public struct guild bank contents list, iNetwork serializable. Great. And then it's just a simple list here. So public list guild bank item. Items. We can rename all these files later if we want. So we are missing our key pack. We have this iNetwork serializable. It does not implement the correct interface here. It's a little cranky. So we're going to put those in ourselves. Nope. Come on. Okay, so again, we're going to add to the buffer items.count. How many items are in here? Okay. We're going to cycle through those items, and we're going to say items. Since this class guild bank item implements the iNetwork serializable, we're just going to pack the data in. And then we're going to put this list back into the pool. So when we create this structure to send to the player, we're going to make a new list of items, like a fresh list. But instead of creating a new list, we're going to pull it from the pool, so we can basically just, it's a performance optimization thing. So we're not killing the server with garbage collection. So on the receiving end, the player, they're going to call this read data. So they're going to get the count, just like we added the integer here. They're going to read the integer here. Items is going to be a new static list pool of type guild bank item. And it's going to get from pool. And if you're curious what that looks like, it's a list of lists, essentially. Then we're going to go through the count. We're going to say item equals new guild bank item. And then we can say item, read the data, items, add, item. Okay, so now we've got a structure here that we can send across the network that just contains a list of duplicate definition guild bank contents list. Oh boy. So this is the actual UI element list. So this is probably a bad naming convention. I just did an auction list. I just said Guild Bank. Let's just say Guild Bank contents. Yeah, okay. So that should be more straightforward. Our naming conventions are going to get a little out of whack here because we're talking about lists and all that kind of stuff. What are you cranky about? Oh, return statement is missing. Okay. That's fine. Okay. Good there, good there. Okay. Guild Bank data. Okay, so we have Guild Bank contents, and we can send that along in our RPC, right? So we go back to our player RPC handler here. Oh, this is for the auction house. Player RPC handler Guild Bank. Let's keep this consistent and put the auction house over here. Okay, and what are we going to pass down to the client? We're going to pass a Guild Bank. What the hell did we just call it? Guild Bank contents. Okay. Right, perfect. Okay. So, a couple things we need to do. If for the server, we're going to do the one thing. Otherwise, we're going to say client game manager UI manager and client game manager UI manager Guild Bank UI, because we're going to be feeding this information directly into the Guild Bank. What are you pissed about, man? I do not understand tonight. Tonight is just something else. I think you're pissed about that. What? Late nights. What's going on, Llama? Just some Brandon. Sorry if this has already been answered. I missed the episode 2. Are you planning to structure it like a storage chest or have items in there X amount of time? So the challenge with the storage chest, just some Brandon, is that we don't have a methodology for multiple people to interact with a storage chest at the same time. You can imagine, a few people from your guild are looking at the guild bank at the same time. Somebody takes something out. I would need to then refresh that on other players' machines. Now, if those other players had that item on their mouse because they were, in the process of transferring it or something like that, right? I'm not saying this isn't possible, but with the development time and the development resources we have, I was thinking of ways to, is there easier ways we could do that and leverage the current technology? So looking at the auction house for inspiration, we can have a list of items where I dynamically update the status of those items, depending on who's listening to it, right? Who's interacting with it. So that's new technology we introduced with the auction house, and we can leverage that here. So essentially the guild bank would be a list of items that are currently in the guild bank, but it's not going to cost money. They're not going to be time limited or gated, right? It's like they'll be in the bank if the bank exists. So it will, from a functionality standpoint, in a client-server communication and a database standpoint, it will be very similar in the structure. The player will essentially deposit an item. The server will then write that item to the database and update everybody looking to say, here's a new item added to the list, right? And we're going to attach some additional information like who added it, what time did they add it, all the typical logging we would want to add. However, since we don't have a lot of permissions on the guild bank level, what we'll probably end up doing is just saying if you're an officer or higher, only you are allowed to extract items from the guild bank. And ideally, what we would do is set it up so you could just right-click on the item and say, mail this to X player in the guild, right? I think that would be the ideal scenario where it's like, essentially, from a structure perspective, you put it in the bank, and then the officers and the guild master or guild leader would get to decide how that item is distributed. So if you're a lower level player and you want something from the guild bank, you would kind of have to request it. And maybe we could figure out a way to like right click and say, send an email requesting this or something like that. No, so there won't be any in regards to be able to add a stack of items and remove X amount from a stack. That would be kind of a stretch goal. My thought process right now is just like get it as simple as possible. And what that means is if someone adds a stack of arrows and I add another stack of arrows, that's 2 stacks of arrows. If you want to combine that stack, the officer would have to do a little manual maintenance, pull those stacks out, combine them, and redeposit. It's not the most elegant system. I can look into potentially combining it. And the same thing goes for like sending stacks of items. It just gets a little trickier. I'm not saying we can't do it. It's possible maybe, but as a first step, just keeping it so like if you want to split the stack, you take the item out, you split the stack, deposit half of it or whatever you brought out, and mail the rest off or whatever you want to do with it. So the challenges really come down to development time and how much time do we want to sink into this versus how quickly can we get this into your hands in some functional way, because it's never going to be perfect and there's always room for improvement, and those are improvements we can easily work on later. Okay, so back to RPCs. So RPCs are a little tricky because we use what's called code generation, right? So we're going to actually generate the code, and if we look at, I think I showed this before, player RPC handler generated. Here we go. So this is generated code. Generate hash sets that are custom to each method call. The delegate commands get registered. All of this code is generated, and this is responsible for packing the bit buffer, packing the appropriate information. So when it gets received on the other side, whoever's doing the sending knows how to execute it. Knows, okay, I need to look up this network player or this networked NPC and then execute this method with this data on this thing. So as you can see, this is an extremely long file. This is all of the RPC handler, the generated code, and this is what does all of the actual network communication, and it's, well over 5,000 lines long. I didn't write this by hand, but I wrote the generator to generate this code because I knew it was going to get crazy. But what we need to do is we need to tell the generator that we need to generate that code. So what we're going to do is we're going to make something called a partial function here. So we talked about partial classes, how this kind of shares. It's the same code as all the other player RPC generators. It's just split into different things. A virtual function is I can define the function, what the call looks like, but another place in the code defines what the actual logic of that function is. So I'll show you how this works. So I'll do partial void server, and as another way to keep things clean, we just copy the method name and tag internal on the ascent of it here. So, and what we're going to send is we're going to send the same thing. It's got the same function call here. So this just defines and says somewhere else at some other time, I'm going to define the logic of this function. But what this allows me to do is now on the server side, since this is the server to client RPC, I can actually call this. So I can say server guild bank list contents internal and pass that along, right? So it's grayed out here because there's no logic, right? It just goes straight to here. So nothing's actually happening yet. On the client side, so the server is going to send it and the client is going to receive it, and they're going to say, okay, do I have a guild bank UI available? If I do, now I'm going to pass the data along to it. So I'll say guild client game manager .ui manager .guild bank UI what is the method we just wrote a little earlier? Update contents list, right? Pass that content in. No, it's actually, if you look over here, I'm only passing the list in. Items, so passing in the items, right? Cool. So now we can go back to Unity here and do some code compilation. Hit refresh real quick. Give it a second, and we're gonna then generate this RPC. Are you guys okay with jazz this evening? I mentioned to Drinden that I was going to put on some jazz, and he scoffed at me, and I was saddened inside. Okay, we got our refresh, we got our compile, everything compiled out fine. So we've now got this, but you notice it's still grayed out. We haven't actually generated the code yet. So if we go into our editor here, go up here to code generation, code generate RPCs, and you're gonna notice, okay, we got something happening. Scripts are compiling. Go back here, this is gonna light up here in a second. Boom. So now, if I do a go-to on this, I have two options. I can go to this, which is that partial definition, or I can go to the generated. So if we go to this generated code, let's see what it added. So you see this line here, this is basically source control, so this is what was added. So we've got two calls. We've got server guild bank list contents internal, and this is basically our parameter. So what we're going to do is we're going to get what's called the RPC buffer, where they're going to add a header to that buffer, which is some magic code that is essentially at the front of the packet. So anybody on the receiving end can actually look at that packet and say, oh, who does this belong to? How do I use this? We're going to do an opcode of an RPC, so the remote client knows how to handle RPCs. If we, let's see, yeah, so if we go to, let's see if I have an opcode of RPC here. Yep, opcode of RPC. So we can go to our entity manager, look up the proper network entity. If it is, we have a method on here to handle the RPC. If not, we're going to probably stick it in the spawn queue because maybe your local client hasn't shown it yet, right? So your local client hasn't received the spawn packet for it yet, but the server has sent you an RPC. So we're going to tuck that data away and apply it after the spawn, essentially. But that's going too deep into the weeds. Let's go back to what we generated. So we're going to add the header, and then we're going to add an integer, and this is a unique identifier that's generated based on, this specific method. It's just think of it as a unique ID essentially. Then we're going to say contents. So in order for this parameter to work, this parameter has to implement the iNetwork serializable interface, which it does, which allows us to just call pack data. So now we're going to pack all of our data into this bit buffer, and then we're going to send the command. And this send command gets into the network code, handles all the packeting, validating the permissions, doing all that fun stuff. Now, on the other side, what happens? So this is the server sending information to the client. The client is going to receive this. So the client's going to essentially, what I just showed you with the opcode of RPC, it's going to look up the entity of interest, and then it's going to invoke this method on it. And it's going to pass the target and the bit buffer as a static one. So it's going to say, well, we need to create a new one of these, which is that structure we created here. So I'm going to create a new one of those, and then I'm going to call read data on it, pass in the buffer that I just received, and then cast that to the player RPC handler, and then the RPC handler, I'm going to call that exact same method that the server called, but this time this is going to come back false because we're actually running this on the client, and it's going to pass that information along to the UI element that we're trying to update. So we just wrote an RPC to send some data to the player, which is fun. But we don't have any data on the server yet. So now we need to essentially mimic the auction house post, where you put an item up, and then that item is sent to the server and removed from the player's inventory. So let's do that. Player RPC auction house. Oh, let's remember where that happens. Okay, so that happens. Let's just trace this back from the client, right? So the client's going to say a new auction. All right, so this is a client to server RPC. This is what the client's going to call when he wants to create a new auction. So let's just trace this all the way back and see what the hell we're dealing with here. So auction house UI, we have this method validate and post auction. Okay, so we have an auction request, which is in this auction house data. So we can go to guild bank data, and we can make a new struct that says basically struct deposit guild bank deposit. Okay, basically need to say, okay, what kind of data are we sending sending along, right? So with the auctions, we're sending the bid count, the current bid, the buyer character ID. So let's see. We have this guild bank item that has the character ID, the character name, and the guild member ID. Right? So we could, in the archetype instance, which is the item itself. So we could essentially, no. See, this is a case of like, you don't want to trust the client, right? So the client could send all this information and the server just does it. But what the client wants to send is essentially where the item is that I'm depositing, right? So it's going to say, I want to send this item from my backpack. It's in slot 4, okay? And then what that is going to allow the server to do is actually say, well, okay, you want to deposit slot 4 into the guild bank. First, we need to look and validate that you actually have this item in slot 4. So let's look up your bag, which is what you told me you want to do it from, and then what slot are you pulling from, etc., etc. However, there's a shortcut we can do for this. So this ID here, I think, at least in the auction, let me double check something. Server, where's that player? Player RPC auction house. Okay, so the client is going to say, I want to set up a new auction. It does that from here, and it's going to send, okay, auction request. Okay, guild deposit request. That's probably a better naming convention here. So each unique item in the game has an instance ID, and that instance ID is completely unique. If you have 2 of the same items, it's great. They have a unique instant ID. And what that is going to allow us to do with this instance ID, the server is going to be able to look that up. So if we look at the server auction house manager, it's going to say auction house outgoing because it's in a specific container. We actually know what container it's in because you had to drag it in there. That's right. It's all coming back to me now. I can't put that song on because I would get flagged for copyright infringement. Gotcha. But it's making sense now. So what we want to send, we have to remember that in the UI, we're going to be taking the item, putting it in a box that's basically the deposit box, and then saying deposit this, so the server knows exactly where to look. The thing we need to do is just send it the ID so there's some validation on the client, on the server side. So if we go to that auction house data script, wherever the hell that was, here we go. Right, so we basically want to say public unique ID, instance ID. And now that I'm looking at this, we don't need this at all because instance, this unique ID, guess what? It implements iNetwork serializable. So we can just pass that as a variable. So we don't need that at all. So what we go down here, region. So in the auction house case, it's a little different. We need to send the item, but we also need to say, okay, what price did you have it set at? What starting bid did you have it set at? And what duration did you have? So there's some additional parameters that you set on here. With the guild bank, I envision it as just, I'm depositing in the guild bank. That's it. There's nothing else that needs to happen. Any other further information that we want to store in the database, such as who did it, what time they did it, all those type of things, we can simply do that from the server. The server has all that information already, right? So, okay, so essentially we want to mimic another RPC that's similar to this. So the auction house says, okay, client, new auction. So we'll say public void client guild bank deposits. Unique ID, instance ID. And this is just a validation step. We could potentially even remove this later since there's only one place that the player can put it, but it's nice to have the client and the server agree, because if something happens and you put that item in the outgoing, but the server doesn't know that it's there and you tell it to deposit, like, you would just want to make sure that the client and server agree on reality, right? Like the server is the ultimate truth, the ultimate arbiter of reality, but it's nice if they both agree, because if you're trying to do something and the server doesn't agree, that's a problem. Usually fixed by a relog. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing, same kind of framework here. Net entity that is server. No, this is a client RPC. So we're gonna do is local first, you know, because that's where we're going to call this internal method on the local client. Else if entity dot is server. Okay. I didn't do that here. Should I do that there? That's fine. Allow auction house use. Oh, nope. Look, I hid it in this method. That entity is server. Okay, that's great. Okay, a new partial method up here that we're going to call with all the invoking fun stuff. So we'll say partial void. Take this, slap internal on there, and then just call this method. It's always a little bit of boilerplate code when you start doing this. So to do this is going to contact don't remember where the hell I put that, so that's probably server game manager guild. Nope. Did I put this anywhere? Nope. I just wrote kind of a loosely tied thing, so I don't have that actually doing anything. So okay, so this is a new RPC. This is going to be an RPC of client to server. Types we have here are client to server, any client to server. I don't even know if I use this. Server to client and server broadcast. So different types do different things. Okay. Oh, I didn't do this. Server, client. There we go. Now I can collapse these later so it looks nice and pretty and doesn't clog up the UI. Okay, we've got a kind of a framework for the deposit here. So this, in the auction house case, this happens in the post auction. So the auction house UI. Gotcha. So there's a guild bank deposit UI. So on the auction house, if we want to look at that real quick. Auction house UI here. We've got 3 sections, right? So we've got this top section here, which is just the auction house, right? So this is an auction house UI. This kind of has references to all of the other stuff. But we also have a new auction component and a selected auction component. Right, so that's this auction up on the left part and the right part. These are broken up into separate scripts because they have separate functions, and that logic kind of exists elsewhere. They deal with different UI elements. They fire off based on different events and things like that. For the so we'll probably do a similar thing, right? We'll have the guild bank UI, which kind of the parent controller here. Then we'll have a guild bank deposit and a guild bank withdrawal. Probably very similar. And again, the logic inside is going to be totally different, so there's no real use in generic, making this more generic so we could write less code essentially. Plus, I don't want to touch the auction house because it's working, and yeah. Okay, so knowing that, let's go back into our code. We've got guild bank deposit UI. Curious if I didn't put these into UI folders or anything. I might do that later. Okay, some monolith behavior here. We got a reference to the parent, a reference to the container. So this is going to be guild bank UI. Don't remember why I need this, but probably need it at some point. Deposit container UI. Perfect. Damn it. Late nights. Item label, submit, canvas control groups. I don't think we. Alright, we'll need those. Yeah. We'll need those. Okay. Auction toggle, auction canvas, group, auction currency. We don't need those. Buy it now. We don't need those. Currency display. Don't need those. Duration increase. Duration labels. Don't need those. Subscriber images. Don't need those. Okay. Got a container instance and an item. Yes, this we absolutely do need. We're going to need references to the container instance, which is kind of like a controller class. And this will be a Guild Bank deposit container instance. I'll just say, just keep it brief. Instance up for deposits. Perfect. Okay, so we're looking at this model behavior here. We got a lot of stuff going on. Item labels, submit. Yeah, we're gonna want a lot of this stuff. So let's just copy it and just whittle through it and see what we got going on here. We need some imports there. Add listener on submit click. This is where the magic happens. There's a lot of validation on the auction house to do with prices and things like that, but with the Guild Bank, it's going to be a lot simpler, thankfully, right? Set control canvas groups. Let's see what that looks like. That's working with, yeah, I think that's the different control elements in the screen. We don't really need that. We don't have the auction toggle. We don't have, interesting. So in the fascinating. I don't remember why I did that like that, but it's fine. We don't use auction currency. We're not doing buy it now. I'm going to come back to these. Don't remember why I did that. We don't have buy it now. No duration stuff. No refresh duration. No available currency required. No subscriber images to color. Okay, so in Awake, we're just literally going to turn on the button and set the item label. Anytime you do a subscription like this, you got to do on destroy. Otherwise, you're going to get some memory leaks and some weird behavior. So let's go ahead and do that. No, not Auction House UI. I'm in the wrong one. Auction House, new Auction UI. Thank you. Okay. On destroy. Yep. Okay. So all we're doing here is we are going to just do the opposite of this. Remove listener. So that's that. And then in start, what we can do is say, hey, is the player existing yet? That initialization function is going to be yes. Okay, cool. This is going to lead us right where I needed to go because I don't remember how that works. No, I remember how it works. I don't remember where we left off. That's really the key. Okay, so in the start method, which gets called after Awake, after this UI element is active, it's going to say, hey, is our local player initialized? If it is, we're going to go ahead and call init. If it's not, we need to subscribe to an event that tells us when we're initialized so we can actually call that. So I'm going to put this in a mono region so I can keep track of that. And now we're going to need these init and the local player init event, and we can probably just snag this from here because, again, a lot of similarities, at least in the startup and the procedural portion of it. So a new container type, Guild Bank outgoing, right? So we're going to look at the local player collection controller, make sure that it exists. The collection controller, we're going to try and get the container instance. So this is deposit outgoing. So try and get a container type of Guild Bank outgoing, and if we do, then we can say deposit outgoing instance equals deposit outgoing. Perfect. And then we can subscribe to an event that says, hey, tell us when this thing changes. Deposit container instance dot contents changed, and we're going to call this not auction container, Guild Bank deposit container on contents change. Perfect. And then we're going to call this method manually because all we did here is we just subscribed to the event. We didn't fire it off. So essentially we want to refresh the visuals. We want to refresh the status. So let's do that immediately after our initialization. Before we go on though, we did miss this. So we did miss an event. So you remember we have two instances. So if the local player is initialized, we do initialization directly. If the local player is not initialized, then we need to subscribe to an event that tells us when he is initialized. So in doing that, where did I structure? I put events at the bottom. Come down here. I can say, boom, local player initialized. We're going to unsubscribe from that event and then call init. Guess what? Submit clicked and guild bank on container. Contents changed. Those are also events, so we can just stick them in this region for organizational purposes. Okay, so now we've got an initialization, and the whole purpose of this is we want to capture a reference to the container that the item lives in, and then we want to subscribe to any changes to that container, because we want to know when the player drops an item in and when a player pulls an item out, because we're going to basically update the UI to reflect that state. All right. Look at all this code we don't need. All these import statements. Might need some of them back later, but that's okay. Don't remember what this is, but we'll get that going. That's just polish steps. We got initialized, we got subscriptions. Now, however, we don't use this anywhere, I don't think. Right, so this guild bank outgoing container type is only used in these new scripts that I've made. There's no creation of a guild bank yet, at least in code. So what we can do is we can look at the auction outgoing, if I can find it here. Rune, post outgoing, auction outgoing, and we can kind of mimic this. So we can find usage of this and say, okay, auction house UI, don't care about that. We already know about that. Interactive auction house is fine, but here we have container instance, container type, player collection controller. Those are going to be the important ones, and this will probably define some functionality we'll want later. Okay, so first thing we want to do is say, okay, let's go look at container instance. And what is this doing? Okay, this is logic of can place. Yeah, allow placement, can place, trigger can perform. So this is logic saying, can we place this item in this container? So we're checking, is it an item? Do we allow placement for the specific type? This is essentially so you can't place your T in your equipment slot, for example. Is it no trade? Okay, so if we can't place, we're going to go ahead and yell about it, yell at you about it. If we can place, we're going to do some additional checks. If it's not inventory, not gathering, not post outgoing, then we're going to bitch about some more stuff. So for now, I'm going to just do a new case. I can probably roll this in later to include this and expand it a bit. But I can just say case, guild bank deposit. And here's where we're going to do some... We're not going to do it now. But what we could do is essentially say, check to make sure the player's in a guild. Check to make sure there's room in the guild bank. Check to make sure there's a lot. This is where we can do a lot of checks to say, hey, can you actually place? So, but for now, we'll just return true right out of the bat and assume that's good. Player collection controller. This is where we initialize your player and essentially create these new, container in code, right? So every time your player logs into a zone, we run through this whole initialize internal where we add, okay, your outgoing trade record, your incoming trade, your post. These are container records that don't live in the database. So they don't get saved to the database. They're just in memory at any given time. So they function the same way as your bag, the same way as your equipment, the same way as your pouches, except the difference is those get saved to the database when changes are made. These are kind of temporary ones that exist for the transient. Things aren't going to stay in them for long periods of time. So what we just added that for auctions. So now we can say guild bank, right? So we're going to create a guild bank deposit record equals new container record. And this container record is essentially the exact thing that gets stored in the database. Type. We're going going to say Guild Bank Outgoing, right? Instances equals, this is a great opportunity to do a static list pool, but to avoid any potential issues, I think I don't do it here. There is no currency in this. Okay, so we've created a new record. The record doesn't actually do anything right now. We want to assign the UI. So we're going to add it to this collections here. This is a dictionary of containers based on the type, so we can easily access those. However, before we do that, we want to make sure we associate a UI with it, because that UI is going to be useful on the client. So in order to do that, we first check first. We say Guild Bank Deposit UI game manager dot is server. If we're the server, we're going to just set this to null. Otherwise, we say client game manager UI manager Guild Bank UI dot deposit container. Look at that. We already exposed that reference for us. Perfect. Okay, so if we're the server, we get nothing. If we're the client, here's the UI container that we want you to associate with. It kind of binds the two together, so the UI container, UI elements, and all that respond to the proper events. Okay, so now we have the record, right? So the Guild Bank record, the container record that lives on your player that's going to hold a single item, right? It's a Guild Bank record container item. However, we don't have the next layer on top of that, right? So remember when we were dealing with items, we had an archetype instance, which is like, this is all the static data of the item. And then we had a layer on top of that called the instance data. That was the unique data, such as the durability, what it was made out of, if it was crafted, when it was created, all those type of, that information is unique per item. So we do the same thing with containers, essentially. So we have a container record, which is just essentially a list of things with additional information, such as like that whole currency, how many slots have you purchased, you know, all those kind of things. On top of that, we need an instance, and that instance kind of acts as the bridge to write the data. It holds a bunch of logic, things like that. That's how our whole container and inventory system works. So we're going to need a Guild Bank Deposit, and this is going to be a new container instance. And what we pass is we pass an iCollection controller, which is what we're currently in. So we'll say this. We need a container record. So we have Guild Bank Deposit record. And if there is a UI component, we need to pass that as well. Guild Bank Deposit UI. Boom. We've done that, and now we can add that to the collections. Collections.add Guild Bank deposit.id and Guild Bank Deposit in the container instance. So now the player's collection contains a Guild Bank. Why is that useful? Well, great question. Let me remember. Okay, so let's go through and just look at, okay, where's all the auction ones used? Okay, so it's used here to determine Ken place. We're gonna fix this up later. And then we go to some extension methods, and we're gonna say, okay, what's the max capacity of each of these containers? Guess what? It's just like the auction outgoing. I'm gonna say case Guild Bank outgoing is 1. What are you cranky about? Did I already add this? What the? Duplicate. Where's the other? Oh, is it the same number? Ah, look. That's a 60, this is a 60, and a 61. Not great. Fine, I get 62. Thought it was the same one. Not the same one. Okay. So we get here. Come down to here. Allow placement. Make sure we can place in this. This prevents you from putting it in. This is just lots of checking. Allow splitting. We can't split from there. Yep. Can't split in that container. This is locked in death. Sure. Don't care. Requires symbolic link for placement. Yeah, so this is using the symbolic link tech, which is for post, trade, auction, and now Guild Bank outgoing. Okay, player collection controller. We already did this part. Universal container UI. this is how does it work when you interact with the instance. I think it should work exactly like the auction, so we can just do this. And that functionality should then, we should get that for free. Okay. Okay, so this is a set auction response, so that's something else. Okay, cool. So now we have, where did I start off on that? That was, yes, that was this. So in that collection controller, when you call try-get instance here, following that around, it looks in that collections, right? So we hadn't added that to the collections yet, so that's why in the player collection controller, we just added it right here, and this is on player startup, so now that's going to exist. Great. Okay, fantastic. All right, let's do a code refresh here, and I'm going to use the restroom while this is recompiling, so I will be right back. Okay, we're back. All right, let's see. Where are we at? Okay. All right, so we just did all that coding. Let's go ahead and hop into the UI here. So what we want to do is new auction panel. I'm going to say, we're going to call it a deposit panel. So let's go ahead and change the title to deposit. All right, so now we're going to find out where all these scripts live. We've got the Guild Bank UI here. We're going to add the Guild Bank deposit UI. Yep. Guild Bank UI reference here, deposit container UI, the universal container UI. That lives, right here. Item label, here, the submit button. Let's go ahead and get rid of some of the stuff we don't need. Duration. I'll delete this stuff later. Hit submit, window frame, perfect. All this new auction control, we can get rid of that. Because all we're trying to do right now is just put something here. The button. Okay. We've got that set up here, deposit container, Guild Bank UI also wants a reference to that for some reason, I don't remember why. Guild Bank contents list, we don't have that set up yet, so we just kind of roll with it. Hopefully it doesn't give us any exceptions, but we'll see. Okay, so got this element here. It's set up. All of the fun stuff is ready to go. So in theory, we should be able to log into our server and get that going. But let me first make a... I don't like showing all this Git stuff here. Let me add all this to our repository. I'll pull it down to my local server next to me, and then we'll give it a shot. See if it works. Guild bank data. Guild bank comments. This is fine. I'll just add all of it here. Container instance, talking about bank, container type, perfect player collection controller, universal container UI. I don't even need the RPCs added right now if I don't want to. But I'll add them just for fun. Okay, add all that. Okay, got that push. Let me pull that on the other computer I've got here so I can get a local server going up. Make sure I have this set to the proper data. There it is. Okay, yeah, fast forward. Great. Refresh. Okay, we need somebody in GM1 here. Get the server started up. Yeah, so the goal here is what we're going to do is we're going to interact with this guild bank item in GM1, and we're going to right click on the window and put something in the container slot and see if it works, see if we get a proper transfer request from the server. If we're able to do that, then we have accomplished our goal. It's not going to be deposited yet because we still have to write the server aspect of the code, right? So we still have to actually work on all of this, which is not currently set up anywhere. I'm just waiting on my remote computer here to start the game up. Speaking of which, so actually has manager, where do we have that in at? Looks like we manager, we just stick it here. Oh, hey, you finally joined the land of the living, computer. Thank you. Okay, host the server. Auction house manager is actually assigned based on some item in the game here. It's a mono behavior. Okay, a little different than normal, but oh, it's still loading. Come on, take a nap. There we go. Oh my goodness, come on. There we go. Okay, great. So I think this is the guild bank. Yep. Awesome. So we're going to clear our logs here. We're going to pop something open. Take these crude dense armor padding and stick it right here. Hey, okay. So if we look at our logs, Transfer request going back, no good. Failed. Interesting. Stuck it back in my bag. Okay, so let's try that one more time. This, stuck it in here, we get a transfer request, okay. So we asked the server, hey, we want to transfer this item to this. We got an okay back. Now, if I try and grab it again, interesting. Transfer response failed. Fascinating. Okay, so we're going to go through here, process, transfer internal. So if this fails, it is failing somewhere along the way. Let me open up my text editor here on the other computer and do a quick debug statement. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set up some breakpoints, right? So the opcode is set to error by default, and we have to essentially set it to true. Okay, instance symbolic freeze, here we go. So where do we set the opcode here? It's not this. Same container, different containers. First available index. Here we are, right here. We're never going to hit this. So that means, let's see if we even get this far. I don't think we do. I think we're going to fail here. Let's open it up on the other computer. You guys can't see this, I'm sorry. I can type louder though, and maybe you can hear that. So the computer's going to drive me crazy. Okay, so we need to go to line 1340. Set us a nice breakpoint. Start the debugger. Try it again. So we go back here, we close this. This seems to return it. And a take all response. Okay, so we got the breakpoint set. Okay, we got the breakpoint is hit. Everything's good because there's that. So let's transfer it back. Source container, guild bank outgoing, target container, inventory. Destination container has room. Source container has this. Source container. Nope. Okay. Let's see. Do we make it past that if statement? We do. Okay. So do we get down to the okay? Get down to the instance here. Instance is null. Interesting. Oh, can remove from container. Oh, okay. Okay, so where we're failing is item is soulbound, that's not true. Well, what the? No! Okay, time to set more breakpoints, because I thought that's where it was, but that's wrong. Try it again. Sorry you can't see my server, folks. That's the fun part, right? Stick it here. We're good. Okay. Got a breakpoint hit. Everything comes back. Transfers out. Fun. Do this. Breakpoint. Okay. Okay. Where are you? Same container. Can this again. Okay, hit that. Okay. So is item. It's soulbound. Oh, it's soulbound. Okay. Should not be able to place it in here because it's soulbound. That's the problem with this item. It's Remember I have that can place check, and I set that can place check to true in the container instance. Yeah, so what I should be doing is not that. I really should be make sure this is in here. Because this checks if it has no trade, right? So that's me messing up. So what I should do is I should be able to take this out in this way. And now I have a no. Okay, this is a no drop item. Oh, I'm hitting breakpoints. Hold on. Server's paused. Okay, I should be able to take this out. This one will come out. Yep. Okay. So that was it. Essentially, I didn't have a check in there, so I was trying to put a soulbound item in there, which is not what you want. But I can freely add and remove. So now, once we get the server manager going, what we can do is once we hit this post button, we tell the server essentially. So if we go back to our Guild Deposit UI, on submit clicked. So then we can say, I just get the player auction house, new auction UI. Yep. Where's the RPC? Yeah, okay, so I just say if local player network entity and local player entity player RPC handler, local player network entity player RPC handler client guild bank deposit. What is the item that we are depositing? Where did I grab it from? Ah, here we go. Can post. So basically saying deposit. So make sure we have a reference to that. We'll put that first. That seems m deposit container instance is null, and m deposit container instance dot try get instance for index. We know we're on index 0 out var instance. Okay. So remember we grabbed a reference to that destination container. Now we're going to do that destination container, try to get the instance out of it. If we get the instance, that's great. We're going to get true. Then we make sure we have network entity and player RPC handler. And then we say instance.id, instance ID. Boom. And it's going to call that RPC, which is here. Call this guild bank deposit internal, which we'll end up calling here. So that'll leave us right here. And that is where we need to go next time. Start working on our server guild bank manager, which is going to be a little trickier than the auction house one for some degree, because there's multiple guilds, right? So the auction house, like I mentioned last week, there's one mega list of all auctions, so it's pretty easy to work with. For the guilds, it's going to be different, because every request that comes in, the player will need to the server will need to check to say, what guild are you in? Okay, now get the list for just that guild and send that to the player. Or if the player has a post, make sure that I'm putting it in the correct guild and then updating the listeners for that guild only. So there's some complexities involved in that we will get to probably next time. We can't do anything until we start actually putting this together. So this is mana behavior, and I think if we check here, I think if we look at the city, which is where this exists, we'll find that. It's drowning out my voice, huh? Yeah, I guess it is pretty loud. There we go. I'll nuke it a little bit. Half volume. Thanks for the heads up. Still getting used to all this. Okay, so auction house. No, where's the server? Yeah, so let's see. That should be in this scene somewhere. There it is. Right, so we would essentially add a new one of these and add the server guild manager. We're not going to do that at the moment. We're going to leave that be. We're going to deal with that next time. So, anybody has any questions? I'm going to turn in just a slightly bit early this evening. I think this is a good stopping point without getting too into the weeds. Essentially, what we have is working on the server auction house manager. Once we have the server auction house manager, then we can actually start writing data to the database. We can start having users subscribed when they interact with the Guild Bank Interactive and get updates. We can start working on those update packets. We can look at permissions on withdrawals. A lot of fun things we could do there. But until said time, there's nothing else to do. That's the next step. I'll put that mark up there so maybe I can remember next week. So, appreciate anyone stopping by. Appreciate asking questions. Appreciate you dealing with my audio issues. Yes, don't forget to like and subscribe. Yeah, I'm not gonna buy into the YouTube stuff. No way, no how. I'm happy to share with you guys, but that's not me. I had the database up, but I guess I won't need that this evening. So, all right, folks. Thanks again so much. Appreciate your time. Hope you get some form of enjoyment out of this, and I'm not just speaking to the wind. So, yeah, let's see what the server auction house manager, server guild bank manager looks like next week. That should be fun because that's a lot of that's when things will really start getting interesting. We'll be able to put stuff up and pull it down and all that kind of not next up undone. I do not know what that is, but okay. All right, folks. Enjoy your evening. Thanks again for your time. See you next time.